Hello, Ken. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Good to be with you again, Doctor.
And I'm Dr. Eric Westman. It's my great pleasure to have the one and only Dr. Ken Berry on, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me on. I don't think some of your listeners probably realize what an honor it is for me to be on your channel because you're one of the founders of the real scientifically based low carb movements. And I appreciate all the work that you've done and that you are continuing to do. And I don't think you get enough credit for that.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. And I guess we kind of just stick to the old pre-biohacking, pre-keto, we call internet keto. And yeah, well, I studied basically what Dr. Atkins was being known for, was he was using in his clinic. And so our research team now, 25 years ago, started studying it, about the same time you started using low carb and keto in your practice. And it's been great to watch you evolve over time. And it was my great pleasure to be in Dixon, Tennessee, just not so long ago, and to meet your partner. I don't know if they're partners, but your people there. What a great conference and meeting. And I wonder I have some questions for you that we're going to ask you, but what's on your mind these days?
Well, just trying to improve the health of the whole world, no big deal. Trying to explore and explode and destroy the multiple myths out there, the misconceptions, the flat out lies that not only are told by the established medical community, often well-meaning, but yet lies nonetheless. But also increasingly here of late, I've been really focusing more on, because as you may know, the mainstream medical narrative has been severely bludgeoned. And I would opine that it is definitely wounded, if not mortally so, in many people's eyes. And so I'm also starting to focus more on the huge pervasive misconceptions and misleadings that are bandied about by internet influencers, because in many cases their social media reach is far wider and far deeper than the American Diabetes Association, right? And so what I'm trying to do is to help people understand that there's a very simple remedy to the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of chronic medical conditions. There is a simple way to, at the very least, lessen the severity of the symptoms and decrease the frequency of the flare-ups, and to decrease the seemingly chronic progressive onslaught of all of the complications that come from these chronic medical conditions if you follow a very simple way of eating and a very simple way of living. You can erase so many risk factors, or at least, we all roll the dice every day when we put our feet on the floor. That's just shouldn't be common knowledge. No, none of us are going to live forever. We're all going to die of something, but nobody wants to die in their 40s or 50s or 60s. And definitely, and perhaps more importantly, nobody wants to be an invalid. Nobody wants to be in assisted living or a nursing home for 5, 10, 20, 30 years because of some complication of a chronic medical condition that could have been completely avoided had they known these very simple things that you and I both talk about every day. And so just trying to dispel the myths in medicine, but also in pseudo-medicine or paramedicine, you might say, that like you don't need all those supplements. You don't need that high pH water. You don't need that ozone machine. You don't need any of that crap. You just need to eat real food and live a real life.
Well, and amen. And, but I have to say the response, it really is that simple, but people say it can't be that simple. And yet it is that simple. I mean, how can it be that doctors know so little about food and nutrition? How is this possible?
It's stunning if you look at it in its totality. And I think, well, first of all, doctors don't get much education in nutrition. I got half of a semester my second year of med school. Half the semester was dedicated to nutrition. So that was like a Tuesday and Thursday for half a semester. And then the other half was behavioral science, Tuesday, Thursday for half a semester. So you can see how important my medical school thought that nutrition were.
Let's talk about human health. What you put in your body as food can't affect that, can it?
Exactly. And so I tell people, if when it comes to the care and feeding of somebody who's got a 3rd-degree burn over 50% of their body, or who's been in a rollover MVA and has just mangled their face and their entire face is wired together, and we have to feed them through an IV, we got great training. Absolutely. We got wonderful training as far as that goes.
Yes.
But when it comes to just the care and feeding of the average human walking the street, the little training that we got was atrocious. And so there's that excuse. And that, I think, that is partly a reason for doctors being awful nutrition advisors, but also I think it's partly excuse as well. Because the word doctor, if I'm not misinformed, kind of means teacher in Greek. And so anybody who's going to be a good teacher, which every doctor should aspire to be, by definition, you have to be a good student. And if you are indeed a student of human health, which I think every doctor should be or strive to be, then you should be a student. You should be curious about, well, I wonder, surely what you eat has to have some effect on your health. I mean, it would seem ridiculous to not think that, right? So let me read a little more into that. And here's this crazy Westman guy. He's affiliated with Robert Atkins, who we all know, his story. But I mean, this guy's he's at Raleigh-Durham. I mean, he can't be a complete kook. He's on the faculty there. So let me look into this. But it's like doctors have lost all of their curiosity. And I think a lot of just regular folks don't realize how much medicine has changed over the last few decades, for sure, but even in just since 2020. Medicine, I think that if you knew the right now, the rate of suicide in doctors, the rate of just burnout, I'm done with medicine. I'm literally going to go back to school to be an accountant because that's less boring. I'm going to just retire early. I hear this every day on Twitter. And it's almost as if doctors not only have really lost that curiosity muscle, but also at every turn, no one is encouraging doctors to be curious. The insurance companies, if they work for a company, that company has no desire for that doctor to be curious. They just want that doctor to get just as many continuing medical education credits as required to keep their license and to keep their affiliation. They could care less if that doctor's curious. And so I think that's a huge part of this. And we read
a couple of books influential to me. One was Dr. Atkins, of course, and I went and borrowed his sheet of paper that he used in his practice to do our studies down here at Duke. But he also wrote a book called Dr. Atkins' Health Revolution. In the 1980s, he wrote a book that showed all of these medical conditions that got better. And it was sort of the roadmap after the obesity and diabetes got better. I looked at this book and, well, heartburn was next. Check. Irritable bowel syndrome. We did studies, fatty liver. We did studies on all these things. And then you wrote this book, The Lies My Doctor Tells Me. And I've known you for some time, and there are times when I just can't say exactly what you're saying. Now, I might be thinking it, but because I still am in that academic world, I learned lots of things from your book and your point of view. Doctors have also been kind of snookered, though, by medications, wouldn't you say? By the pharma world and the choice of pill over lifestyle. And so I'm trying to remember, you got into this because of your own personal experience, I believe. Me, I saw a couple patients do this in front of me, and I may be the last doctor who was curious to actually track down how did this possibly help. But so tell me about your practice. And I have to say, I really highly value doctors who have the street credibility of being in a practice doing this. And tell me a little bit about your background in the clinical world.
Yeah, so I've been in uninterrupted practice for over 22 years now. And when I first went to medical school, I wanted to be a surgeon. And then I realized two facts. General surgery, pretty much all you're doing is, what they would say in surgery, guts and butts. And then also you had to get started at 4:30 in the morning. And I was like, yeah, I can't do that. So then I considered OBGYN until I found out that all women go into labor at 4:30 in the morning. Again, come on, and so I discovered family medicine. And I could do as many procedures as I wanted, including scopes, including large tissue biopsies, dermatology, lots of procedures, colposcopy in the gynecology sphere. And so that's what I decided to do, because I could start at 8:30 in the morning, by George. And my practice, I had full intentions for a while to be an emergency room physician. I didn't want to have a clinic, but everybody kept saying, I really like you, doc. You ought to have a clinic. And so I thought I would start a part-time clinic. And while I worked in the ER, it wound up being full-time for the next 20 years until the clinic fire. And now I have a small part-time practice where I take care of about 200 old patients and patients I've had for decades. And because I'm so busy kind of trying to educate the world, including doctors and dietitians. But I learned early on, when I became severely obese and pre-diabetic, perhaps my medical education about nutrition was not adequate. And so that's when I started reading outside of what many doctors would consider my scope of practice, right? And one of the books that was instrumental for me was a copy, a little paperback edition of Atkins Diet Revolution that I bought for 50 cents at a rummage sale. And I just thought, well, I'll read this. I don't know who the heck this guy is. And I still have that book. And so I'll put that in my archives one of these days. It's one of the foundational books. And so then that led me to primal and paleo and all these. And then I kept hearing about keto. And then when I looked into keto and started trying it, man, my prediabetes was gone, losing weight like crazy. Heartburn it used to be so severe, I took 2 Nexium every day. None of my patients got the Nexium samples. I got all those.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it was 80% better on keto. I'm like, so every now and then I would take a Tums or a shot of apple cider vinegar, and that controlled what previously was barely controlled by taking 2 Nexium a day and having 2 red bricks under each head post of my bed. So I was sleeping inclined to try to keep the acid down. All these other things kept getting better. And so I started recommending it to my most severely obese patients, people who were literally on the schedule to have bariatric surgery. And they kept coming back to me with, oh yeah, I've lost 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds, whatever. But also my knee arthritis is so much better. Also my heartburn is so much better. Also my psoriasis, my eczema, just on and on and on and on. And initially, as a practicing physician, you think, yeah, they're, patients are silly sometimes. No telling what happened there. And so the first time I would hear that, I'd be like, nah. But then Dr. Westman, the 10th time,
Right.
and the 20th time, I'm like, well, maybe what physiology, what could possibly be explaining that knee osteoarthritis is getting better before they've lost enough weight to really change the biomechanics of this? And that's when I started thinking about the inflammation, and I started looking at the inflammatory markers, and lo and behold, there's research out there that shows that a low-carb diet does that. And I'm like, and so then I started recommending it to everybody who was on the schedule to have a knee replacement or a hip replacement or a thumb joint replacement. I'm like, you should try this for 90 days before you have that surgery, because there are known potential complications of surgery. Why risk it if you could fix this with diet? Not everybody was interested, but some were, and enough got so much improvement, they called and canceled their surgery for joint replacement. And that's when and then I kept hearing about Carnivore, which, a lot of people think, oh, that's some weird other thing. It's really just a subset of keto. Keto is very low carb. Carnivore is just the lowest possible carbohydrate version of keto. And if you eat a high fat enough version of a carnivore diet, you're going to be in ketosis the majority of the day. That's been shown in hundreds, if not thousands, of anecdotal cases. I don't know if there's any research on that yet, but I bet there's some coming, because the fields of keto and carnivore are very popular right now among researchers. Last time I looked on clinicaltrials.gov, there was over 400 trials with keto in the title that have been registered or are ongoing right now or have just been completed and the research is not published yet. Over 400 trials, and it may even be more than that now. And I know there's several going on with Carnivore right now as well.
I think that's an important point to notice that these are very close in terms of teaching and foods. And even this is one reason why, because I've done low carb keto research, carnivore-ish, carnivore-like, reason why, it's not all that different. And yet the language and I'm not doing carnivore. Well, actually, you're pretty close. I mean, but I'm not doing keto. I mean, so I've learned to just counsel my patients to tell their doctor they're doing a Mediterranean diet or modified Mediterranean, and the doctor says, well, that's fine. But these are very close. And I even had someone kind of, argue that carnivore wasn't necessarily keto. Well, there's an internet version of keto where you're adding in oils and medium chain triglyceride, and you have to have special coffee and apple cider vinegar and all that. And that's not what we're talking about. But I think what you and I agree on as a foundation is that you eat real foods. You don't add in all these other really kind of keto junk products and junk foods. And so that's why I'm really intrigued. And also being clinical myself, I've had some people who I couldn't fix with just a cup of vegetables a day. And they cut out that 1 cup of vegetables, they're fixed. I mean, and this could be the skin condition. It could be the gut condition. So how could that be? It's just a small change, doctor.
Yeah. And so when I first started being very interested in the ketogenic way of eating, I thought that it was all about the carbohydrates. And I think for the vast majority of people who are overweight, obese, or who have prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, I think that is a huge part of this. You've got to get the carbohydrates down very, very low. But the more I read about it, and especially the more I looked into the inflammatory markers, and a good friend of mine, Dr. Chafee, I'm sure you've heard of him, he says plants are trying to kill you. And that is hyperbole, no doubt about that. But some of his points are valid. Any plant, even a plant that has been domesticated and crossbred by humans for thousands of years, still contains many what some people would call anti-nutrients, which some people would call phytochemicals. And I think you know this very well, but for your listeners, there is a normal distribution curve for every facet of human physiology. Every lab test, every biomarker that we can measure, there's a normal distribution curve. And so I think when it comes to phytochemicals or plant toxins, that normal distribution curve still applies. I think there are some people who can eat 20 pounds of cruciferous vegetables a day, and as long as they allow for the carbohydrates, they have no problems, no inflammation, no issues whatsoever. For the vast majority of people, they can have a serving or two of brassicas of some kind and no problem, nothing. No, they can't detect anything. But there is a subset of people who the anti-nutrients or the phytochemicals in some of these plants has a noticeable chemical reaction. And I'll give you an anecdotal example. Anisha and I were just in Alabama visiting my side of the family, and my dad and my grandmother are avid gardeners. They have a huge garden every year. And so we were down there and they had corn on the cob that they had raised. They had turnip greens that they had raised. And they also had brisket and Boston butt because I knew I was coming, right? And so Anisha and I both are she's ketovore, technically under 10 grams of carbs a day, but she's got to be very watchful of what carbohydrates, what plant she eats, because she has an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Yeah. And if she eats the wrong vegetable, it'll flare up her numbers. Her TPO antibody and her TG antibody will start to elevate and she'll start to have symptoms. Whereas for me, it seems that it's just all about the carbs, doc. As long as I keep my carbs as close to zero as I can get them, my A1C is great, my fasting insulin is great, my waistline is not great, but I'm okay with it. But we both decided to have a serving of those turnip greens. And they were delicious. They were not non-GMO, They were organic. They literally, the only thing that they'd been added was dirt, water, sunshine, and chicken poop. That's what had grown these turnip greens. By our family, we knew these people, right? So we know there's no chemicals. There was no, big pharma, big food. There was none of that. It was just literally grown in the backyard. And within 2 hours of eating just a normal size serving of these turnip greens, Nisha was having muscle spasms and joint pains and just felt miserable. I had zero effects whatsoever. And she knew this, but she thought, well, I'll give it a try because, it also, Granny Berry, it hurts her feelings if you don't eat her turnip greens. So, there's that family thing as well. And Nisha wound up suffering for 2 days after eating these turnip greens, which by carb count were perfectly for keto or ketovore.
Yeah.
But for her, and she likes to talk about the N=1 experiment, although she can eat 30, 40 grams of carbs a day and she's fine. She doesn't fatten easily like I do. She didn't develop prediabetes like I do, but she's got to watch specific vegetables or they will absolutely cause inflammation. And you've met Nisha a couple of times. She's a no-nonsense person. She's not going to be talking foolishness on purpose. And she didn't even want to believe it herself. And finally she's like, it was those damn turnip greens. I know it. That's what it was. And sure enough, that's what it was.
Well, so I think it's an important separation. So low carb allows your body to burn fat. And you can get low carb, you can get keto, you can get carnivore to burn fat. But to be totally anti-inflammatory or even ketones themselves can have anti-inflammatory properties.
And I think for many people that the ketosis that comes from eating low carb enough masks the inflammation that they're having from whatever vegetables they're eating. And this, Doc, since I'm really going down this rabbit hole, I thought, well, I've got to know more about archaeology. I've got to know about diets of the past. I've got to know more about anthropology, paleoanthropology. And so what I've found very telling in the anthropological and archaeological record is that fermentation of both plants and of dairy have been around for a long damn time. I'm talking about 7,000, 8,000 years. That sure, people in Asia, they eat soy all the time, but until just a few decades ago, they virtually never ate soy unless it had been fermented, right? Many of the cultures that developed lactase persistence still fermented it because you can't forget about the casein in the whey. For many adults, that's very inflammatory, even if you have lactase persistence. And so what I currently think, I believe, and if anybody thinks that's an equivocal statement, it's not, because I think that's how everybody looking at some kind of scientific subject, that's the language you need to use. But to be honest, what I think that I currently believe is that all of us probably have some reaction to the phytochemicals in plants. And most of us, as an adult, have some level of reaction to the casein in the whey in dairy. And so if you're in a deep state of ketosis, those ketones are so therapeutic, they probably mask that to some degree. And more in others because of the normal distribution curve. Some people, it's just too severe of a reaction. And so I really think that a 90-day carnivore elimination diet, eliminating everything but meat and egg. Seafood, sure, it's fine. Include it if you want to, but nothing breaded, no vegetable seed oils, just in case, right? Just meat and eggs for 90 days. And then you can do these N=1 experiments of adding back in the turnip greens. Turnip greens, how could that be a problem? For some people, I think it is, even if they're well cooked, because Granny Berry likes to cook hers to death. Nisha was definitely not eating these raw, and still, whether it was the oxalates or whatever, had a body-wide reaction that was inarguable.
Yeah, well, the use of this, especially if you're under medical supervision, I think this is a reasonable thing to do. And if you're watching this, you're wondering where to start or anything, you want to learn from someone who's been using it. There's a false expectation that the teacher has to be doing it, but there's just kind of an expectation that if you're a YouTube doctor influencer, you have to be eating that way. So, okay, we do eat this way, but that shouldn't have to be that way. Well, I wonder, so as things have evolved, you're doing more YouTube and influencing lots of people. I get lots of great feedback from my patients who watch your YouTube. Thank you for that. And now I want to kind of get up to speed with what is happening with YouTube. And I watched Dr. Eric Berg talk about how, woe is me. They're putting me down on the list and all this. And have you experienced that? Or wasn't YouTube supposed to be censor free? Let the people decide.
Yeah, I haven't noticed any kind of throttling or shadow banning or censorship whatsoever on YouTube yet. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but I haven't noticed any of that at all. I have seen some videos of influencers claiming that to be the case. Also, keep in mind that one of the main drivers for making YouTube videos is to get as many clicks as you can. And you can imagine if I made a video with a big banner that says censored over it, a lot of people would click on that just to see what I was talking about. And it may be true in Dr. Berg's case. I don't know his back end numbers, so I can't speak to that. But all I can speak to is I have not noticed any shadow banning or throttling at all, and Nisha hasn't noticed any. And other people I've talked to in the keto space, in the carnivore space, they haven't noticed any of that either. But I'm always I'm optimist, but I'm also a rationalist. And so I've got all of my videos backed up on Rumble, also backed up on Odyssey, which is another video platform. And every time I post a video to YouTube, it also posts to Rumble and to Odyssey, just in case, because although I haven't noticed any throttling or shadow banning, I'm not saying it's never going to happen. I'm not saying it hasn't happened to other people, but I think that YouTube has bigger fish to fry than a way of eating that people are talking about without, trying. Now, if you're selling a whole line of supplements and you're making false claims about the supplements, then there's an argument. Yeah, okay, they're probably going to crack down on that. And so, as you may know, I don't have a line of supplements. I don't sell supplements. I don't recommend supplements for the vast majority of people. And so I try to keep my message very clear, very simple, and very true to the message that if you eat the right foods that are ancestrally appropriate, nutrient dense, low in carbohydrates, and avoid all frankenfood, all highly processed grains and sugars and vegetable seed oils, then your health is going to improve, at least to some degree. Now, some of us may need to tighten that up even more. So on the Venn diagram, here's low carb, here's keto, here's ketovore, and here's carnivore. These circles are concentric. They're all in the same group. Ancestrally appropriate, nutrient dense, low in carbohydrates. I think that's the three big drivers. And then I have noticed from the thousands and thousands of people who have given me feedback that the more red meat they include in their low carb, keto, ketovore, carnivore diet, the better they seem to do on average. And so I think that ruminant meat plays an especially large part in this. I don't know currently all the details about that. I don't know if it's because there's some magical zoonutrient in ruminant meat that we haven't discovered yet that's magically healing these people. But I suspect that it's just as you eliminate things, you're focusing on just nutrient density, a beautiful fatty acid profile, a beautiful amino acid profile, lots of vitamins and minerals, and you're not getting anything else that may be causing inflammation or slowing down your progress. I think that's probably what's going on. But we may discover some magical zoonutrient that's in ruminant meat that we didn't know about in the future. That's possible.
Well, I've met some interesting doctors through the years. Dr. Atkins was one, but there was another line of thinking that eating is a stress, right? So yeah, you're actually taking something through your intestinal membranes, and it's like there's a battle going on. Absolutely. With if there's bacteria coming in and you're fighting it and all this, so that
every time you put a bite of food in your mouth, it initiates an immune response. That's absolutely true. And a lot of people, and you can just tell some of the gurus out there on the internet, they do not understand that concept at all. I'm talking about even a bite of the most ancestrally appropriate, non-GMO, panda massage, grass-finished ribeye. You still have an immune response to that. Your immune system, from the time it passes your lips, is constantly monitoring that the entire way, because we're just tubes. If you think about the way our body's designed, we're a hollow tube. And so the inside of us is also technically the outside. Yeah. And so if we have an immune system on the outside, we actually, we have no stratum corneum on the inside, right? We have only epithelial cells. And so the immune system has to be hypervigilant when something goes inside of but a lot of people don't realize that. And so all food, every food you eat is going to be inflammatory to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without exception.
You want some inflammation. I mean, there was a meeting. There was a doctor came in and swooped and pooped, we say, because he gave a talk and then left, letting the rest of us having to pick up the pieces. But he basically said eating causes inflammation, so I don't eat. I'm like, wait a minute.
Right.
So you take it to the absurd a degree, you'll die. I mean, but I think if you eat closer to the ancestral way of eating, where and eating other animals actually makes sense to me biologically, and that it's going to be less stressful to digest. I mean, that's just, I watched a video recently with a young man who had an ileostomy because of ulcerative colitis. He didn't know about the carnivore or keto diet before he had the colectomy. He says when he eats meat, he never sees meat come out his ileostomy. I mean, this is when you have your bowel movement comes out in a bag and he can see it. I mean, it's a clear bag. So, but when he's eating any kind of vegetable matter, especially corn and that corn on the cob, maybe even those turnip greens, they're going to come out undigested.
Absolutely.
When you really look at our anatomy internally, I like that idea of a tube, because really there is the external world even inside us. We have the internal anatomy, the GI tract of carnivores.
Yes.
Not herbivores.
Yes.
Really not you could argue omnivore, but
that really confuses a lot of our plant-based brothers and sisters, our vegan brothers and sisters, because we did evolve from herbivores and frugivores. 100% absolutely true. But hippopotamuses and those are the least distant cousins. There is no land animal that is more closely related to a hippo than a whale, but they do not have the same digestive. So the point is, even though we evolved, our least distant cousins are the chimp and the bonobo. No doubt about that. But we have evolved for millions of years, about 7 million years since that split took place. We've changed since then. Yeah. Especially in the gastrointestinal system.
I remember being at a meeting with, it was a great meeting because Jeff Volek and Steve Finney were there, and it was a small meeting, and I get this question in the audience offline. Someone's just chatting with me, and he says, well, but we should eat like gorillas. And I didn't know much 15 years ago. Right. So I go back to Steve Finney, who's, my teachers, our teacher, really one of the main pioneers of this way of eating. He looks at me and goes, well, a lot can happen in a few million years. You don't have the internal on that. In fact, I'm trying to figure out how to tactfully do a video, just debunk. There's this kind of gorilla idea among the vegans and veggies that we should eat like, no, we don't have the internal anatomy. But again, we don't get much training in medicine, and we get drug training and
when a medical school is accepting people with a bachelor's degree in music theory, that I think that really does a disservice to medicine. And I love music, that's great, but I think there really should be a hefty load of pre-medical classes that you should have to really do well in before you can even be considered for medical school. And in many cases, and also a nurse practitioner school. There's a school here, a very prestigious school in Nashville, that you literally can have a bachelor's degree in anything. It matters not what it was. You can be a nurse practitioner after 1 year of training. It's like, what? Wait, what? And that's
in my experience, these health provider, I don't like the word provider. I mean, I'm a teacher, I'm a doctor, but they're being groomed to really just follow guidelines.
Exactly. They're being groomed to follow guidelines and to prescribe medications. And so in that scenario, you don't care if they know anything about anthropology or mammalian biology. It's irrelevant. All they need to know is what's the algorithm for when you prescribe this versus that. That's really all they need to know in order to be successful in that model. And obviously that model is failing us daily and obviously, and more regular people are seeing that. I think a lot of doctors and other healthcare providers are not seeing that it's the model, it's the paradigm that's failing. The reason you're burnt out is not because you hate your patients. It's not because, you're a bad doctor. It's not because of any of those other things. It's because the model that you're practicing in. And it's very hard for people to see the paradigm that they're living their life based on. The old joke about one fish says to the other fish, "How's the water today?" And the other fish says, "What's water? What are you talking about? What's that?" Most doctors don't realize that they're practicing under a paradigm of medicine that was solidified decades ago. There's a lot of history about this. They call the germ theory. And the germ theory works great when you apply it to bacteria. Right? That's the reason that people don't just die when they cut their finger anymore, or when they get appendicitis, or when they have a perforated whatever. You don't die of that anymore because the germ theory is very applicable and very useful. But what we tried to do was apply the germ theory to all practices of medicine. So the way the germ theory is currently applied to diabetes is, you've got diabetes. Here's a GLP-1, medication. Here's a glimepiride, here's glyburide, here's this, here's that, here's a pill for that. Instead of going, well, maybe it's the diet and what the diet is doing to the body. And so for so many doctors, that doesn't fit in their paradigm. And it sounds woo-woo, it sounds crazy, it sounds, depending on the doctor, it could range from being tree hugger and crutchy to being weird and conservative. Like it literally depends on the doctor as to how they interpret that, when they hear that the food you eat could matter. And more, doctor, they're saying, oh no, obesity and type 2 diabetes are purely genetic conditions. There's nothing you can do about it. There's no bad food. You can eat any food you want. You just have to take these pharmaceuticals. And that's just what it is, because it's genetic. It's not your fault. It's not the food's fault. It's just genetic. And that's kind of the culmination of the germ theory. There's literally, you have nothing you can do about this. You just have to take the pharmaceutical.
Yeah, and as a lack of awareness that changing the food could do such good, it's so unbelievable. Nobody believes it. But I can go to a gas station and I can't get junk gas. I can't get bad gas. But I go inside, I get junk food for the human. So we treat our cars better than the people. But switching gears just a little bit, are you following some of the other big internet influencers and how there's this kind of fluttering in the winds? I think of a sail going back and forth, how some people are pulling away or getting beyond keto and carnivore. And what are your thoughts about these folks?
Yeah, again, back to the way YouTube works, you've got to have a thumbnail and a title that are compelling, that make you go, wait, what? And so then you'll click on that, right? And then when the viewer clicks on that, then they're going to watch at least enough of that video to figure out what the hell's going on in that video. And if you watch that video for 30 seconds, that's considered a view. And so there are so many influencers out there they're just in it for the clicks and the views. When keto was very popular, and there is a fad component to the keto diet. If you look at Google searches for keto, or keto diet, the searches got ginormous, and they peaked about 2018, and they've been slowly going down. It's not as popular as it was. And so that, for a lot of people, converting from keto to carnivore wasn't the next step in the shift of their paradigm or their healing journey, or there's more science. Oh, okay, let me look into this. Oh, okay, primate anatomy and physiology. Oh, okay, because that's kind of how my transition has been. It's about, oh, carnivore's hot now and keto's not as hot anymore. So therefore I quit keto. That's a video. I've started carnivore. That's a video. And then, right. And so there'll be something beyond that. And we've seen early carnivore influencers now, they've included fruit and honey because, what the Hansa do or something in Africa, this hunter-gatherer society that
Right.
literally have been taken off of their ancestral hunting grounds and have been put on the scrubbiest, most worthless ground, because that's what happens in every agricultural society, is the hunter-gatherer remnants that are left over, just like the Native American in America. When we moved them out to the reservations, did we give them prime agricultural real estate? No, that's not what they got. And so if you said, oh, the Native American diet today, you can look at that and you can see that it has literally nothing to do with what Native Americans would have eaten 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. And so a lot of influencers, they go and stay with some tribe in Africa. They stay in the nice little hut for Westerners for a couple of days. And then they come home and they've made this groundbreaking discovery that the Hadza, they eat fruit and honey, and therefore we should eat fruit and honey. And so it's just this ongoing thing. And that's why I'm trying to tell people, look, you get useless noise from your doctor when it comes to nutrition advice. Very, very often. It's just worthless noise. But also, there are many influencers who are also putting out just as much useless noise. If your goal is to improve your health and to improve the health of your family, there's a set of principles that go to making up a proper human diet for you. The degree to which you adhere to and apply those principles, your health's going to improve. And the degree to which you ignore them and don't apply them, your health is going to not improve or maybe even suffer. And I think you and me and everybody else in this space, we're kind of hammering out these principles of what a proper human diet is. I don't think we're discovering a proper human diet. I think we're rediscovering lost knowledge that 10,000 years ago, it would not even have been a discussion of what you should eat and what you should avoid. How much should you eat? How much water should I drink? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I eat red berries or green berries? All that stuff has been sorted through the trial and error of millions of years of this scientific experiment called evolution. And then when the human species, when we developed culture through language and being able to recount our story, like that's literally what makes us the apex predator, the apex species on this planet, is being able to share our story. So when I say at the end of my YouTube video, share your story, I am literally following in the footsteps of not just you and not just Atkins, right? And not just Will Wilhelmsen. I'm following in the tradition of every human since the first human stood up on their hind legs and said, because that's what we do. We learn something through personal experience, and then we share that with everybody else in the tribe. Don't eat the green berries. They'll give you the shits, or whatever it is that you've learned personally, you pass that on. And so through the eons of trial and error, humans knew what to eat, just like the deer in the wild. They know what to eat. They don't need a book written by a doctor to know what to eat and what to avoid. They just know. My sheep in the pasture, they know what to eat and what not to eat. Don't eat too much of this. You can have some, but not too much. They just know. I think it's possible for the human species, the human animal, to know you should eat mainly this. Maybe a little of this, not too much. Maybe a little of this, not too much. It depends on your family. It depends on your DNA. It depends on maybe your gut microbiome. But within reason, here are the principles of a proper human diet. I think all of us together are kind of rehashing those out. And this time, hopefully, they won't be forgotten when the next big fad, which is what the pharmaceutical era, that was kind of a tidal wave tsunami fad of, oh, you can fix everything with a pill. People want to call keto and carnivore fads. That was the ultimate fad. That makes the keto and carnivore fad look like kindergarten students versus a triple PhD board certified fad. That's what the pharmaceutical fad was in the vast majority of instances.
So switching gears and wrapping up, how are we going to get to the new generation, the children, families? So, we're in a clinic pulling people out, saving lives, but really we want to stop people from going down this path, this river. And so how are we going to do that?
So we're going to have conversations around the campfire, just like we've done for millennia. And that entails everything from talking to your next door neighbor and saying, if you cut out the Lucky Charms and the powdered donuts and the Pepsi and start eating eggs and bacon for breakfast, I think your diabetes would improve. That's a conversation around the campfire. But in modern society, so is what we're doing right now. Everybody who's listening to this, it's just like we're sitting around the campfire 100,000 years ago and relaying, hey, don't eat this root, but eat that root. Don't eat this. Watch out for this animal. Never stand behind the horse. Just practical common sense stuff. Once one person learns it, they share it with the tribe, share it with your tribe. And so social media, that is the new way of communicating with your tribe. And every time I go to a conference, I'll always say, everybody's always trying to poo-poo social media. Oh, you should just delete this and delete that. You should throw your phone away. And I say simply, how many of you in this audience of 100, in Poland, it was 2,000 people, has your health improved because of a video or a post that you saw on social media? Every single hand in the room goes up. That's the new campfire. That's how we converse. And obviously it's a global campfire now, but still that's what it is nonetheless. And so I would encourage people to listen to all sides. Do as much research as you're trained enough to do. Figure out who you really trust. And then keep in mind that what Dr. Westman and what we're recommending is not some nearly FDA-approved pharmaceutical pill or infusion or injection that has no long-term data on safety. That's not what we're recommending here. If it were, then it would make sense for you to say, I'm going to hold off on that. I don't know about that. I don't think there's been any RCTs proving that keto safe or carnivore safe. We're just recommending food that humans have eaten for millions and millions of years. It's just food. And so I don't think that saying, okay, humans have eaten this for 3 million years, to say, oh, that'll cause cancer, or that'll cause heart disease, or that'll cause diabetes. Red meat will cause diabetes. What? That's an extraordinary claim. And yet they come at us with observational data, which is the weakest kind of evidence that you could possibly have. People, it's sad that the average person has to understand a little bit about statistics and the way research is done. But if you're going to sit around this modern campfire, you're going to have to understand the difference, this kind of research and that kind of research. You're going to have to understand, well, if you're saying you should drink water, you probably don't need a randomized controlled trial to prove that that's safe for the long-term consumption in humans. It's water, damn it. We've been drinking water since before we were Homo sapiens sapiens. So I don't think water's bad for us. I don't think breathing air is bad for us. Well, guess what? We've been eating fatty red meat, fatty meat, eggs every time we could find them for as long as we've been drinking water and breathing air as a species, for exactly that many years, that many decades, that many millennia.
But all my life, I've had Captain Crunch and Fruit Loops and Lucky Charms.
And you're right. And so that makes us sad when we see that, like, oh, here goes the next generation with the Lucky Charms and the Doritos and the Pepsi. But it should give everyone who's rediscovered a proper human diet and where they fall on it, as an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent or a parent or an older sibling, you should really think, okay, so Frosted Flakes, everybody thinks that that's an acceptable breakfast food. Well, how many generations did it take to bamboozle human beings into thinking that Lucky Charms or Frosted Flakes was a healthy, nutritious breakfast. It only took 3 or 4 generations, right? And so what I want people to understand is it's actually easy if you look at the long game. And so if you're an older relative of younger relatives, realize that your culture, your heritage, your family traditions are probably only 2 generations long, okay? And then once you realize that, that's a very powerful paradigm shift. You're like, so if it only took 2 generations of basically my family used to be wealthy, then somebody screwed up, and then we were really poor, and now, we eat beans and rice. And that, or if we get tired of that, we have rice and beans, and that's just what we do. We buy the 5-pound bags of cornflakes because we can't afford the name brand, and that's our family tradition. Well, there are reasons why that's your family tradition. That's the bad news. But the good news is you can start today as an older relative to change that. It only takes a generation or two until you've created a new family tradition, a family tradition of eating a proper human diet that does not include processed cereal, that literally is frowned on in your family. If somebody brings Lucky Charms to the table, they'll be ostracized. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why would you even bring that to this table? Our family eats meat and eggs, a little bit of veg, a few berries, a few nuts. That's our family tradition. And you can't have that junk at our table. So I think that once people realize I can change the narrative, I can change the paradigm, at least for my family and my friends. What more could you ask for as somebody? Regardless if you think you'll ever change the world in any other way, you can change the world with regards to your family traditions and the way your family eats and the way your friends eat. You can literally break the narrative and install a new family tradition around your table. That's pretty powerful.
Thank you. And I always like to hear your optimism, and influencing others. I know you have a way of saying that you might not want to just, if you want to, don't be so pushy about, you're excited about it. And, when you're together, what's your approach to teaching others one-on-one in the family, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So you've seen the transformation in people's health thousands of times, just like I have. And what I tell people because when you first discover keto, ketovore, carnivore, line diet, a proper human diet spectrum, it's a big damn deal, Eric. You're like, oh my God, I've got to tell everybody in the world about this. Just like when any of us discover anything. Poor Beckett, he discovered the other day about static electricity. If you rubbed the balloon on his head and threw it up, it would stick to the ceiling. Literally everybody that came in the door for the rest of the day, he's like, static electricity, oh my God. That's human nature. We all want to share the good news around the campfire. We all want that. It's hardwired in us. But you got to think, they don't know what I know. They haven't discovered everybody's at a different part of their journey, multiple journeys. We're all on multiple journeys every day. And so food may not be part of their journey right now. The way to get people's attention is to fix your own health first. If you're obese, fix it with a proper human diet. If you're type 2 diabetic and you're having to inject fast-acting insulin before every meal when you sit down in front of the family, fix your type 2 diabetes, fix your fatty liver, fix your visceral adiposity, fix your hypertension, fix your eczema and your psoriasis. Yes, they improve if you get on the right part of the proper human diet spectrum. Fix that stuff. People not only are going to see the improved outward physical health, obviously you're not as fat as you used to be. Obviously you're not injecting fast-acting insulin right before you eat anything at the table, but they're going to notice an improvement in your mood as well. You're aware of Dr. Chris Palmer, a psychiatrist who wrote a book called Brain Energy. Literally every mental health condition improves when you give them a ketogenic diet. I don't think they found one yet that doesn't get better, even including end-stage severe schizophrenia that the person was previously institutionalized for decades. They put them on a keto diet. 6 months later, they're out of the facility. They've got a part-time job, that kind of stuff. When people say not only you're physically, you're obviously healthier, you're more active, you're more engaged, but also mentally, you're much more clear, you're much more aware, you're much more alert, you're much nicer. A smile comes to your lips very readily. A laugh comes at the appropriate time. You're just a happy, healthy person. When people see that, it's hard not to see that, especially if that person was previously miserable and suffering. To me, that's the best calling card. That's the best advertisement. That's the best.
One time you made a connection with, say, a relative coming to get into a get-rich-quick scheme. How did that go again? It was, let's say your relative says, help me in this new multi-level marketing.
Yeah. They're like, oh, man, I've got this new multi-level marketing thing. Oh, man, it is the stuff. I need you to sign up under me because I'm going to make you rich. And they drove up in their beat-up old Buick. And, you know, they're still wearing the clothes they bought at Walmart 5 years ago. But yet they're telling me, dude, I found this get-rich-quick, we're going to make saying. I'm like, yeah, but I don't see any outward evidence that you're in any way wealthier than you were last week or last month or last year. I'm going to hold off for now, and you come back to me next year with this when you've made a couple of $100,000, and I can see evidence that you've made a couple of $100,000, and I will sign up immediately under you for this multi-level marketing thing. And that's a common sense way of looking at the world. And I think the average person, if they have some relative coming at them saying, boy, you need to do keto, and they're obviously, they haven't improved in any noticeable way, it's not time for you to be preaching the proper human diet message yet. You need to focus on fixing you first. People are going to be naturally curious because just like a million years ago around the campfire, if we see a tribe member, and that could be your family, your friends, your extended family and friends, if you see somebody in the tribe, and every night when you're sitting around the campfire, you're like, that dude, he looks healthier every night. He's just getting, I'm going to go over there and talk to him. I'm going to see what he's doing. That's human nature, is to be curious. When somebody's obviously winning, and that can be finance, that can be health, that can be anything. When somebody's obviously winning the game of life, you're naturally curious. You want to know. And so I encourage people not to be apostles or, not to be preachers of the gospel. No. Fix yourself and keep yourself fixed. Live a proper human life. When somebody is at that point in their life, when they're ready, and for some people that takes a medical scare, that takes a chest pain trip to the ER, or that takes losing a toe to type 2 diabetes, or going blind in one eye because of a retinal detachment. It takes that for some people. Just let them live their life and say, hey, I'm here to help if you're ever interested, but I'm not going to preach to you. Because when they have whatever moment in time that is, then they're like, crap, I need to do something about my health. You're the first person they're going to think of because they've been watching you around the campfire get healthier and healthier. They're going to seek you out and say, all right. I'm ready to hear about whatever the hell this keto thing is you're doing. Tell me, teach me how to do it. And then that's it. You just saved a lot.
Fantastic. Our time's up. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and answer some questions that my people have had. Again, thank you for all that you're doing to improve people's health, and all the best to your family.
Thank you so much. Nisha says hello, and hopefully we'll be together IRL real soon. But until then, keep doing what you're doing, Doc, because you are making the world a healthier place. And people say every day, I'm so much healthier because of you. Thank you. I can never thank you enough. And I'm like, I'm a damn doctor. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. Right? But I still appreciate the thanks, but that's what we're supposed to be doing, is helping as many people be healthy as possible. So keep doing what you're doing, Doc, because you're changing the world.
And you too. Take care now. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.